Welcome one, welcome all to the greatest show of them all, the NFC East Mixtape. You can listen to the show in any of 4 different NFC East related platforms across SB Nation. Blog of the Boys for Dallas Cowboys coverage, Bleeding Green Nation for Philadelphia Eagles, Big Blue View for New York Giants, and Hogs Haven for Washington Commanders. You can also watch this on the Bleeding Green Nation YouTube channel or the Blog of the Boys YouTube channel. I say this, it is a product that is put together by our fantastic producer, Rachel Prevet, also of Bleeding Green Nation. He is Brandon Lee Gowton, also of Bleeding Green Nation. I am RJ Ochoa of Blog of the Boys. BLG. Happy Tuesday to us. Happy Wednesday to the listener. Happy last week without any football activity of any single kind for the next 7 months. So, yeah.
TGIF, RJ. I have to get to a correction at the top of the show. There's a listener in the YouTube comments, I believe, on the Blogging the Boys page, and they wanted us to correct the fact that Eli Manning, he's not a 500 starter because you have to include the postseason too. So when you include his 8-4 record in the postseason to his 117 to 117 regular season record, he's not a 500 starter. He's a .508 career starter. So wow, I really had it wrong.
There are a handful of Eli stans. And I will, I respect like a stan of anything. You know what I mean? Like I respect loving something so much that you're willing to go to bat for it. Well, yeah, like if you love something so much that you're willing to argue about it, I respect that you love something that much. I might disagree with you.
Bad things. I don't know, man. Like everything about Eli annoys me. Like I've just reached that point. I know you're a big golf guy. The Open Championship was this past weekend, and it's a big golf tournament that happens every year, rotates locations. It was at the Old Course, which is the home of golf, big thing in the golf world, Brandon. And so it's like on a lot of people's bucket list to go there, experience it, whatever. And so when this tournament is there, it's like a big old ta-da. And I saw Peyton Manning posted a photo on his Instagram story. It was him and Eli. And I was like, man, that's so cool. Peyton's getting to like be there, experience this. Then I was like, but Eli's there. Like it just like irks at you. On this subject, I don't know if I've ever said this on the NFC East Mixtape. I tried to make a nickname for Peyton Manning catch on that never did. And I want to get your thoughts on it. Okay.
People called him the Sheriff, right? Which I think was kind of dumb. Like that, wasn't that great of a nickname.
Be a better name for a Cowboys player.
Exactly. Thank you. I've long said, Brandon, that teams' rings of honor should be called something to do with their like mascot. Like the Broncos should be like the stable of honor. The Jets could be like the hangar of honor. You know what I'm saying? So I love where your head is at as we start this episode. But Peytonium, I wanted that to be his nickname so badly. Dude, that sounds cool.
Neutron stuff right here.
That sounds cool. I wanted to get your take on one last thing before we started. Today, we are going to put together our NFC East All-Stars from a special teams perspective. And because that will only take 5 minutes, we are then going to discuss our biggest questions heading into training camp. Biggest questions, obviously, for all 4 teams. Are you ready for my final thing? Because I was told by many people to bring this up to you.
All right.
So I'm going to make this a compliment for you.
Uh-oh.
You are really good at eating food. Like better than most people, if that makes sense. Like you're so willing to try things, willing to explore, willing to combine flavors and, pair them with drinks and things like that and understand, the chemistry of eating food. And I respect and admire that about you. I love you, Brandon. Anyway, so I will be the first to admit that as a child, I was a bit of a picky eater. And that's the case for a lot of children. I used to eat my hamburgers plain and dry. I was one of those, like I don't want my food touching sort of things. And I think that I decided at some point that cheesecake was gross. And then I forgot. I think I decided that and then forgot. Just because I was like, ew, cheese. I don't want cheese on my burgers. Cheese. You know what I mean? Again, I'm not like defending this, 5-year-old decision. At the age of 5-year-old, not that it's actually a 5-year-old decision. And so last Friday, my wife and I, somebody gave us a cheesecake and we brought it into our home. We were watching some friends on the tube, having a good time. And she got up to get a piece. And I said, looks kind of good. And there's an episode of Friends where Chandler and Rachel really love a cheesecake. And I always kind of thought like that looks kind of good in that episode. And so she was like, it is good. You should try it. She's, as my wife, she's like, quick, get over this stuff. Try different foods, whatever. So she's introduced me to, I wouldn't love Brussels sprouts if it weren't for my wife is one example. So I tried the cheesecake and holy crap. That's my bad. I'll take that L. I was missing out for a long time.
I'm so glad you brought this up because I actually brought this up. So I heard this, I believe, this morning, Tuesday morning. I think you brought this up at the end of Monday Football Monday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I did.
At some point. Yeah. And I listened to it. I listened to the first half like yesterday and the second half today on Tuesdays we're recording. And I got so mad, so viscerally mad when I heard you hadn't had cheesecake in your entire life. You're older than me, which like I get so mad that I brought it up to Elizabeth and Holden, who are Paul's parents, who I saw this morning when I ran into them because they're big listeners of the mixtape as well. Because they were like, hey, what do you got going on today? And I'm like, well, I had to do the mixtape. And then it instantly clicked that I was like, I'm so mad that RJ said he had never had cheesecake. It's such a ridiculous thing to say and also to not do, to never have cheesecake in your life. And I'm glad you finally had it because it's good. What kind? Did you mention what kind?
I didn't, and I got a lot of like, you got to try this, you got to try that. There were all sorts of like, and there was so many people who made that like they literally have a factory for like, that joke was made a million times. It was strawberry cheesecake.
Oh yeah.
And there was like thin slices of strawberries on it, which were great. And so after the first couple of bites, I said, man, this is really good. I'm gonna eat like, because it was most of a cake that we were given, by a neighbor, and she was like, "No, you're not." She was like, "You'll see, like, kind of as you're done with that piece, like, it's a little bit more filling than kind of meets the eye." And I do kind of think that I really liked it. Like, I'm not trying to at all imply or infer that it wasn't great, but the actual like cream cheese is it's a little bit. It seeps in and it just kind of expands once you hit it. I don't think this is like a Vogue take, or this is a Vogue take rather. The crust was my favorite part. But somebody recommended, I forgot what it was, to be honest, but they sent a link to me of like this, really popular cheesecake chain. I think you can like order them and they're going to be like delivered to your house wherever you live. And I was looking at the photos and one looked amazing. So as I understand, this was kind of like a conventional cheesecake, like crust at the bottom, cream cheese, fruit slices on top. I'm sure you've had that with cherries, strawberries, blueberries, I don't know, whatever. But this one looked really good, Brandon. It was like as if the cream cheese was in like a pocket of crust. Like the crust extended up and covered it on the top. That's what I want to try.
To me, when you're having a cheesecake, what makes a good cheesesteak? It's got to be a thick boy in the sense of like you have to be able to kind of, if you're putting your fork in it, to kind of cut,
You're going fork. I went spoon. That's an interesting already.
Yeah, I'd probably do a fork. Like there has to be resistance. It can't just be like, straight down. It can't be weak sauce. Like there has to like almost like a consistency of cheese a little bit. Like it has to give you some kind of resistance. Also, to me, like you can go a bunch of different ways with it. I like a chocolate chip cheesecake. Really simple, keep it simple and good. So here's how it came up. Didn't Rachel, where did she say had good cheesecakes? Didn't she bring it up? Did she say TGI Fridays or am I crazy?
TGI Fridays. Yeah, she said that on Monday Football Monday.
So TGI up again, but like I was so shocked she didn't say the Cheesecake Factory. I was like, Rachel.
I mean, I respect Rachel's a super clever person, so I respect that she didn't just take that low hanging fruit. You know what I mean?
I got to go Chili's by the way over TGI Fridays. Not a sponsor, but I'm Team Chili's over Applebee's any day of the week. Yeah.
Okay. Team Chili's over Applebee's. Is that what you said?
Yeah, and like TGI Fridays, all that kind of, any kind of in that realm there, it's Chili's number one.
What else is in that realm? Chili's, those are three solid ones. Chili's, Applebee's.
There's like
maybe
other
Cheddar's.
Like things that might be a little bit more localized, but like in that kind of ilk, like, just like that chain generic kind of place. Good deals. Also, I want to hear from the people, RJ. What is your favorite cheesecake? You can add us on Twitter at RJ Ochoa and at Brandon Gowton.
Instagram as well. I thought of you because I was like, Brandon would be proud. I grew up. I experienced this new thing. So I don't know what's next on my list. You know what? Actually, I will decree right now, I've never had pumpkin pie because I'm not like fond of the of pumpkin as a taste.
They make
this
pumpkin
might upset
pie
you more.
cheesecakes.
Well, this might upset you more. My like opinion on pumpkin is sort of based off of trying like pumpkin spice latte stuff. And so, I'm willing to give it a chance. Like I'm willing to admit that I've been wrong on a lot of things. So if any, and similarly, we want to hear your opinions on cheesecakes, but if you have an opinion on how I need to try pumpkin pie for the first time, what kind of pumpkin pie, whether it needs to be hot or cold, a fork or a spoon, we want the full 101. Are you ready to proceed, Biaggi?
Yeah. Now that we're like 10 minutes into the show. Yes.
NFC East All-Stars on special teams. What do we want to do? We want to do kicker, punter, long snapper. We want to do a gunner.
Punter, long snapper, kick returner, punt returner. And then I was going to throw in like a special teams player, but I had a tough time coming up with one, to be honest. So I think we're just going to keep it to those first 5 that I said. Let's start with kicker. These are pretty straightforward. It's Jake Elliott. He's coming off a Pro Bowl season. Who else would you even put in here?
I mean, nobody. The Cowboys, just to speak on my local team, don't have I mean, their kicker is a rookie in all likelihood, Jonathan Garibay, an undrafted free agent, and so I mean, can't really believe in him. I don't really think New York or Washington have anything to kind of be proud of. I mean, we're talking about Graham Gano, and I mean, Joey Sly has had some moments in the NFL, but yeah, it's Jake Elliott. This isn't a close competition. Are we ready for the punter?
He was 90.9% from field goal range, 30 of 58, so pretty good. Made all 3 of his kicks from 50 plus, and then he was 44 on extra points, so didn't miss a single one all year. That's been an issue for him in the past. He'd always missed like a few a season, so good job by him. Punter, this one's also pretty obvious. Why don't you say who it is?
I thought that I would make you angry with some of the things that I said about food and cheesecake and pumpkin pie and whatnot. It's Brian Anger, who most people don't know, by the way, Brandon. Obviously, Cowboys punter now, Texans punter before that, but was initially drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars back in 2012. He gave birth to Rich Eisen's Punters Are People 2 line. It was Brian Anger. So the 10-year anniversary of that passed a few months ago. A little fun fact for you there, but Brian Anger also coming off of a Pro Bowl season. I maintain, obviously I can't prove this, but Cowboys special teams coordinator John Fossil would not have had Brian Anger on the roster if Johnny Hekker had been released. I know we talked about that in the training camp discussions we had a year ago. So it worked out for Dallas. Johnny Hekker, do you know where he is now, by the way?
No.
He gave up number 6 in Carolina to Baker Mayfield. So he's already had a fun, quirky storyline. Johnny Hekker, so cool. So way to go, Brian Anger.
Should also say, Tress Way, probably also in consideration as a close second, had the same average as Brian Anger did last year, but was not second team All-Pro and a Pro Bowler. So, I mean, kind of hard to not give it to Anger here.
Mm-hmm. Kick returner, I think, is very obvious. I mean, it's
long snapper.
Long snapper. I don't care. I mean, who do you want it to be? I mean,
I have some long snapper facts, some data to support this. RJ, it's Rick Lovato. Last year, you tried to make an argument for Jake McQuaid. Is it? I can prove to you, without a shadow of a doubt, that it should be Rick Lovato. Had a 69.6 PFF grade last year. McQuaid 58.2. Nice. Cameron Cheeseman, good name, but 59.2. And then the Giants long snapper, Casey Kreider, had a 36.0. He stunk, man. So it's Rick Lovato for the second straight year.
Okay, great. I offer no fight. Tony Pollard is the kick returner. And I mean, depends how crafty we want to be. Like, is he just returning everything? He might as well. I mean, we had him as the NFC, the only 2-time All-Star, 2-way All-Star here on the NFC East Mixtape this year, because we agreed he was the most dynamic running back of the group, so he has to be the returner. And I'm fine. Throw him out for kick returns, punt returns. Just give him all the opportunities with the football in his hand.
Okay, but officially kick returner, because I want to do a punt returner too. But it's hard to argue otherwise. The only thing you could say, I guess, is he? And the answer is no. But would he potentially have so big of a role, and would they actually fade out Zeke that they wouldn't want him to return kicks? I would guess the answer is no on that, at least for now. That's all I had. I will say, file this name away, RJ. Jason Huntley. He's the best kick returner on the Eagles. He had 5 kick returns in college, a really good college kick returner. For whatever reason, the Eagles didn't use him last year. And those have heard me before on BGN Radio will recall me saying he only had 3 returns last season. And they all came against the Cowboys, I believe, in that Week 18 game. And one of those 3 returns, RJ, was the second longest of the season. In his 3 opportunities, almost had the best return of the season. What were they doing? It was very. I said I have a tweet from back in September of well, I'm bummed the Eagles didn't keep Jason Huntley on the roster because he's clearly their best kick returner, and they didn't, and they really stunk in that regard. And it's not like kick returner makes a big difference in today's NFL. We're not in the era of remember Josh Cribbs, RJ. I feel like Josh Cribbs kind of gets forgotten.
I think I was actually going to ask you about this, or kind of flip this question on you. Everybody remembers Devin Hester, obviously, he's and I'm somebody who believes put him in the Hall of Fame. You know what I mean? Obviously, sure. Josh Cribbs was Devin Hester light. But I was gonna ask you who had that role, the Josh Cribbs, Devin Hester sort of role for the Eagles. Has anyone in recent history had that role? Because there is an answer for the Cowboys.
Well, it's going back a bit now, and most of his career came with Washington, so he kind of gets more remembered for that part of his career. But it's Brian Mitchell. Brian Mitchell is like a really good returner, and I would say him.
The Cowboys answer, I don't know if you recall, is Dwayne Harris. He was just kind of a specialty returner. He had some like moments as a receiver, but Dwayne Harris just kind of had this like proclivity for pulling off these like, I vividly recall there was a Sunday night game against Washington. He took the house, but always just kind of managed to kind of do the right thing, make the right decision. And I didn't want to forget, I think we have to shout it out. Tony Pollard did have a kickoff return for a touchdown last year, and it was on Thanksgiving Day against the Las Vegas Raiders, the game in which the Dallas Cowboys lost in super heartbreaking fashion.
And the Raiders used to be the team that your guy was on after he left the Cowboys, Dwayne Harris.
He initially left them for the New York Giants, though.
Right.
So there was a little bit of bad blood there. Okay, punt returner, not CeeDee Lamb. That's really all I care about. Like I'm like,
right.
Where do you fall on this? By the way, like if this like is this like a training camp question? Like should Devontae Smith return punts? Like are you somebody who's like, yeah, I want to see it, or are you like absolutely not? It's not worth it.
Well, to me, with Devontae specifically, it's like break glass in case of emergency kind of situation. Like you really need a spark. You're down like really big early in the game, let's say, or you're kind of Hail Mary mode, so to speak, at the end, and you need kind of like Deshaun Jackson to kind of pull a miracle out of his behind, like he did once.
The miracle at the Meadowlands, part
number 2. So yeah, I think situationally like that, I would like to see that. Because by the way, Devontae had like really good college return numbers. I think that's kind of an underrated part of his game, but they're clearly just not going to do that because of his offensive role, which is the same problem I think we have here with CeeDee. It's like it's hard to put him on there. Like, is he probably the best player right now? Yeah, but can we really put him on there, especially with Amari leaving?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, sorry, CeeDee, not making the cut here.
So who is it then?
As a punt returner, I have an
answer.
I mean, if we're cheating here, so these are the punters that our lads has listed. Just so we're dealing in this. Alex Erickson for the Commanders.
I think that's the answer.
Well, so I loved him was it in Cincinnati?
Yep, that's where he was for his first 5 seasons.
I loved him in Cincinnati, and so I'm down. Let's do it. Let's get a commander in here. We haven't shown them a lot of love. Alex Erickson, congratulations. Here's your official NFC All-Stars jacket.
He had 10.1 yards per return back in his last, active season, I would say, more so in Cincy last year with the Panthers. Still had 23 returns, dropped down to 8.9, which is still decent. So his career is 8.1. His worst years came earlier in his career. Since then, he's been better. Hasn't have a touchdown yet, and isn't like he's not like Darren Sproles or Dante Hall or someone truly electric back there. But he's like a guy who like knows how to get positive yards, and yeah, you'll take it.
And like I think it gets underrated, and not to be the like, oh wow, he knows what he's doing, but like not. It feels like not every return man in both a kick and punt return situation fully knows the rules. You know what I mean? Like there always tends to be like an example every season of like somebody who just like understood something in a different way. And so
back when he was on the Packers, or was it him? Yeah, I think it was him. Or who was the other guy? Finley? No. What's his name? 88. Ty Montgomery. Remember, have you ever seen those clips on YouTube of like 1,000 IQ plays in the NFL where somehow it happened to the Packers a couple of times where the kickoff bounced near the out of bounds, like near the sideline. Well, no, he let it onto the ground, but instead of so it's in play, but what he would do is he would lay down so his legs would be touching out of bounds and then touch it.
And then touch it.
Because then by the rule, if you are out of bounds and you touch the ball is also out of bounds. So that's like a really
awesome.
Smart thing to do. Yeah, it's really smart.
That's really cool.
And then, so then the kick return is at like the 40, right? Like you start at the 40 instead of the 20 or where else.
Correct. It's the 25 now.
25, right. Yeah, so it's a big deal.
That feels like one of those rules we forgot happened. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like, whatever. But, okay. Gunner, CJ Goodwin, that's like his thing. That's like his one job in Dallas.
I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, so you agree. Opinion. CJ Goodwin, glad we agree. Universal agreement right here. Cool.
I just said no opinion. I didn't say agree.
Okay, so CJ Goodwin it is. So our kicker is Jake Elliott. Puncher, Brian Anger. I forgot who our long snapper is.
Rick Lovato.
Kickoff, return man, Tony Pollard, punt returner, Alex Erickson, and gunner, CJ Goodwin. Congratulations. That concludes the 2022 NFC East All-Stars.
Wow.
Along the subject of the All-Stars, I have a question before we get into biggest questions heading into training camp, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
Have you ever been to an All-Star event, like a pro sports event?
No.
Like anything? What do you think would be the most and least interesting? And you can answer anything. So like for the NFL, it's really only the Pro Bowl. You can't be like, oh, I missed back in the day when they had the like awesome things. Like, yeah, we all miss that. Like that would be great, but that's not a real thing. You can say All-Star Saturday Night in the NBA. I have been to that. So you could see the dunk contest, 3-point contest, etc. The All-Star game, you could say the home run derby, which we just had. And tonight, Tuesday night, the night we're recording, is the MLB All-Star game. So what would be the coolest experience? What would be the least cool experience?
I don't know. I've never really thought about this, RJ. Probably, I think the NBA All-Star game, I think probably would be the coolest to go to. That's my answer.
And the least cool? You have to answer both.
Cool. Probably NHL.
I agree. I don't think the Pro Bowl would be that cool.
Yeah, that is true. I think I watched some of it this year. Not the whole thing, but I like turned it on to see some of it. And yeah, there's really nothing you can do. Everyone's like, oh, how do you fix the Pro Bowl? You can't do anything. It can't be saved. It's just, you have to do something that isn't the Pro Bowl. And even then, do people really care? No.
I think the home run derby would be kind of fun, but it would get kind of old.
Derby's good.
It would get kind of old.
Yeah, it's not great. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. Cool. All right. We're gonna take a very quick break to hear a word from our sponsor, and then we're going to ask the biggest questions heading into training camp. Brandon, welcome back from the break. You ate a whole cheesecake, you said, throughout the break. The YouTube audience even saw it. Do you feel full?
I feel content. I'm not stuffed. I just feel good.
What's the biggest whole thing you've ever eaten? Like maybe it's like a whole pizza. Like you know.
I mean, this is a really easy answer. So there's really kind of two answers to this. One is 2 entire pizzas one time, and the other time was 36 inches of hoagie, and both times really full, but both times also really good.
Okay,
that's a lot, RJ. You're not reacting properly.
Would you put hot sauce on the pizza?
Yeah, of course. Oh. Why not? What are you talking about? I don't know. That's a normal thing. And what kind? It depends. I like hang sauce a lot, but hard to go wrong with the Crystal. Crystal is a good one.
Would you put Cholula on the pizza?
I had Cholula one time. Maybe I need to try it again, but I wasn't a fan. Gotta retry it.
You mean like in general? You've only had Cholula one time?
I think so. Yeah.
Wow. You gotta be careful though, because it's a glass bottle. And so, like, as you're getting it out of the fridge, if it's a tile situation, you drop it, it's a big mess. So,
wow, did you do that?
I didn't do that. My friend Jimmy did that. Not Jimmy Kempsky, but it was a different Jimmy who did that. And I tell that story. We actually dropped a tub of salsa last week in our fridge. I had to get the dog out of the way. It was
real Brian Malone. You are Kevin Malone.
Yeah.
Okay. That was the real first name. They wrote Kevin Malone from The Office. Remember the chili? He dumps it. You've seen The Office. Your favorite
I hate certain things that like have become over. Like anytime anyone makes a mess of anything, like whatever social company it is, like uses that. It's like, okay, we get it. You know, I
hate wasted food in shows like that. Like that was probably some really good chili that it's dumped all over the floor and wasted.
I don't know. It was probably really good, but I'm starting to kind of like. I hate how people treat The Office as underrated. That's a take of mine. Like, I guarantee you, if either one of us, I could tweet right now. I could be like, the tweet could literally say, I don't care what anybody says. The Office is the greatest show of all time. It would get like 5 million likes because like people would be like, yes. Oh, and then you would get like 4 other million people would be like, no, Parks and Rec is better. Like nobody's having these arguments. So
I see a lot of the my hottest take is Parks and Rec is better than The Office. That's not a hot take. Like, come on, like everyone I feel like thinks that because they don't want to say The Office is cool because that's not cool. The other moment in cinematic history, or I guess I'm including TV shows in this, is in Breaking Bad, where Walter White throws the pizza on the roof. That made me so mad. And why did it have to be a pepperoni pizza? You're gonna waste the pizza anyway. Why not just make it a plain pizza? You put pepperoni on a pizza, throw it on a roof and waste it.
It was also very large.
Like it was a larger than normal pepperoni pizza.
Like an extra large pepperoni pizza. They could have given it to me. Instead, they threw it on a roof and they wasted it.
I bet you were real pissed off when Lucy and Ethel smashed the grapes or whatever with their feet or whatever it was. And I Love Lucy. So.
I don't know. Yeah, I saw that recently.
Anyway, okay. Biggest questions heading into training camp. The podcast audience cannot see this, but we even have a banner that asks the question for the YouTube audience. I guess we'll each come up with one question for each team. We didn't totally decide the rules, but I think that's fair.
I guess.
Let's start with Washington. Why not? Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm going to go first?
Sure.
Here's my question. What if Carson Wentz is good? And I don't mean like holy crap good, but like what if he's like moderately good? Like what if he's an average starting quarterback? Like if he is the 16th best quarterback in the NFL, is that not the best quarterback that they've had, like relative to like context in, I don't know, like 5, 6, 7 years?
So here's my thing on Wentz, RJ.
Ooh, here's the thing.
Here's my one point of like, how could you possibly think this would work? Because we've said that before. I've said that before, right? Especially when we did the emergency podcast and the trade happened. I was like, what is Washington possibly selling themselves on? And the only thing I guess I can think of now is that my biggest criticism of him, or at least one of them, has been the inability to be honest with himself. And going to Indy was an experience where he didn't have to be, because Frank Reich was still there. And he was like, okay, the Eagles were wrong. I'm still good. I'm not back with Frank Reich. I'm all good. Like, I'm still the man. But now it's really hard, I think, for him to be in that spot, given the way last season ended, and given that he's in an entirely new building with people like he doesn't have familiarity with. I think that is the one thing you can point to and be like, okay, maybe he finally will change because the environment has changed so much. Again, I have a hard time fully believing that because I think that's kind of just baked in him at some level. But that is the only like saving grace I can think of.
Yeah, like that's a really great point. Like, what if he truly has been humbled? Like, maybe that you're kind of like rewording my question. That would make sense. Like, I even think and I've made well note of this on the SB Nation NFL show. But like, I don't know. Maybe I credit the Eagles for this because like they didn't have to go out of their way to like thank Carson when they traded him away, but they were not jerks to him. And like on one hand, you have to like acknowledge Carson did a lot for the Eagles organization, helped them win a Super Bowl, whatever. But my point is like the Colts have like destroyed him. You know what I mean? Like right. I think like whatever like pent up negative energy Carson had towards the Eagles came only like from what occurred throughout the divide. I think the negative energy he probably feels for the Colts has probably come only since the divide, as they have done everything they can to like sacrifice his public image in the name of maintaining theirs. So I think Carson's probably like, you know what? It's time to grow up a little bit. This was his truly like falling on his bum. He's getting up, he's dusting himself off, and yeah, what if he's good? That could be really different, in this division. That'd be interesting.
All right. My biggest question, because I already kind of gave my thoughts on that, would be what do we see out of John Dotson? Like, can he come in and be a difference maker? Because, it was interesting, the machinations of what Washington had to do. They really could have traded that pick. If they wanted to pay A.J. Brown in addition to Terry McLaurin, they could have done that because like they traded a pick that was higher than the pick that the Eagles traded, right, for A.J. Brown. So they got Dotson instead. It seems like they're really counting on him to be a immediate kind of contributor. We've talked about this ad nauseum, like who is the other receiver that Washington has outside of Terry McLaurin? And I think especially when you look at how Carson Wentz plays, and Carson Wentz doesn't love to go outside the numbers as much as he loves to go over the middle of the field and throw, more specifically, throw to his tight ends typically. And I know Dotson's not a tight end, but like, can he develop chemistry with his receivers? I guess you can throw tight end in there, because it's not like Washington necessarily has a ton of proven options. I mean, Logan Thomas has shown potential, but he's had some injury issues. And then behind him, what do you have? John Bates, Cole Turner, like no one, no one behind him. So I'm interested to see it's an extension of Wentz. I'm not going to double up on him because he took it, but like, how is he gelling with his receivers? I think specifically Dotson.
I agree. I mean, if we talk like what exists in the like world of practical possibilities, like the finite possibilities here this season, it's possible that at season's end we're saying like, Washington has the best receiver duo in the division. That's totally possible, right? Like, I mean, it's drastically like elevated by Terry McLaurin, but if like it is not difficult by any means to come in. I'm not trying to like minimize what these players have done, but it's like Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. We have learned over and over and over again that you can just come in and take over the NFL by storm. What if Jahan Dotson is like cut of that cloth, and all of a sudden now you have two elite receivers, two very good, however you want to put it, receivers. I mean, that you're right. Like there a lot of momentum swings one way if he turns out to be solid, reliable, even just moderately good. I mean, he gives them another passing option, which they haven't had. If Carson is stable, he gives them an actual literal passing option. I don't think we have any questions about the Washington defense. I think we kind of trust it to just kind of like maintain somewhat status quo.
Just Chase Young's health, really. But
right.
I think we're just going to assume that he gets back at some point and is fine.
Okay. We want to go New York Giants next? That's how we want to do.
Let's go to the G-men. The teams we never talk about, RJ, the Commanders and the Giants. We're going first with them today.
Okay. So that means you go first because I went first.
Okay.
So
I guess I'm just curious to see, what is it, Brian Daboll training camp? What is that like? To what extent is there a real culture change? Because we think back to Joe Judge coming in, and there was a lot of hairy high school kind of stuff going on with, making his players do laps and push-ups.
Is that
and all
an
this kind of
expression?
stuff.
I've never heard that before. Is that a real expression?
It absolutely is. Jimmy likes to say it a lot. Google it. I mean, you can do that while I'm talking here. Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting. Now, I fully expect not to see stuff like that, but I'm interested to see what it does look like. And I'm sure we're going to get a ton of puff pieces. Like Brian Daboll, I think you talked about it on Monday Football Monday, like he's going to do something where he's like really hands-on. Everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is totally different because people eat that stuff up. But I am curious to see, what does a Brian Daboll training camp look like? Are guys buying in, especially for a team that doesn't have these super high expectations? It's like, okay, can we lay a foundation here? Can we get a buy-in? Any kind of read of where the Giants are, and probably honestly, the best thing for them would be a very quiet camp, a camp where they're not making headlines for the reasons like they were with Joe Judge.
So that's a really good question. I do think we will get the New York Post something article like these aren't Joe Judge's practices anymore, or like there will be some like very, very clear and obvious, like there won't be a single fight. Remember when Joe Judge's teams were like brawling with each other? It will be something like that. Like we'll get some like New York writer that's like, wow, I haven't seen a fight. Are we sure this is a Giants practice? Something like that. So I think that's a really good answer, or a really good question rather. My biggest question surrounding the New York Giants entering training camp really is Kayvon Thibodeau. Like that's just my question. Like what is he like? Is he like, I don't like putting a ton of stock into like leadership unless it's like an extremely rare and exceptional leader, like say Dak Prescott, obviously. But this team is kind of void of that. Like I know Saquon's like the face of the Giants, but is he really like the leader? So do you listen to the Around the NFL podcast by chance? We've never talked about this, but okay, so but obviously super mega popular NFL podcast. The gentlemen from NFL Media, they do a great job, obviously hustling and moving and grinding. So did you see the heat that Kayvon Thibodeau caught from his appearance on this show? I meant to bring this up on the mixtape. So Kayvon Thibodeau was on the Around the NFL podcast in the lead up to the draft. Just kind of like, hey, and one of the hosts, Stan Hansis, is a Jets fan. So like, hey, maybe you might end up a Jet, whatever, blah, blah. Oh. And he was super funny and charming and witty and clever, like 10 out of 10 sort of appearance. But again, it's the lead up to the draft. Like all these guys tend to kind of like crush those sort of things. So he's on, right after being drafted. Okay, like not the same thing. Super pumped. I'm a Giant now, whatever. Like, oh, I got to get an apartment in New Jersey, blah, 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 whatever. He was on after that. And one of the other hosts, Mark Sessler, is a little bit more eclectic, a little bit more of a unique thinker. And that's what makes the podcast great. And they had some like funny questions for Kayvon Thibodeau, like very clearly just having a good time. You know what I mean? Like not taking anything seriously. And he was kind of like terse. He was kind of, not into it, not really kind of, willing to tick for tack, not willing to kind of ping and pong. And it was really obvious. And
is that a phrase?
What? Ping and pong? Tick and tack? Yeah. Those are phrases. And it just was kind of a bad look for him, I thought. Not willing to, like, he just kind of seemed like not fun. And maybe I'm reading too much into it, but which guy is he? Because like my point is like in the, I don't know, 50-day span that he was on that show 3 different times, we saw 3 different versions, or we heard rather 3 different versions of Kayvon Thibodeau. So who is he? Who is this guy? Like who? Because Saquon may be the face, but I think Kayvon Thibodeau is the front man for the New York Giants. And so what does this culture look like that he is kind of the bedrock for as they start to rebuild what they hope is obviously a legitimate football team?
Yeah, and in fairness to him, maybe he's having a bad day. I don't know.
Sure, yeah. I mean, anything's possible. I'm just,
Yeah, I just want to include that in there just to be fair to him, the objective, fair journalist that we are. But I've said, about Thibodeau before. I think it's definitely going to be an interesting player to watch. I almost think he is primed to disappoint based on how he, he's coming in with these big expectations. Okay, the Giants kind of got a steal or whatever at number 5. They gotten him when he could have been the number 1 overall pick. And I just think people are kind of expecting really big things from a guy who didn't have the biggest. RJ is messaging me on Slack is during the podcast, and yes,
okay. So you've seen my message. I'll be right back.
Yes, yeah. RJ has to go take care of something real quick, so I'm just gonna. I will vamp while he is gone. He will be back shortly. So with Thibodeau, I've said it before. I'll say it again. I just think that when you see these red flags pop up, like they did with him, a lot of people want to be like, well, actually, that's just other NFL GMs just making stuff up about him to try to push him down the draft board so they can get him. And again, there's probably some of that isn't untrue. At the same time, I think one would be remiss just to ignore all of those red flags because there probably is some truth in them. And I think it's going to be very interesting to monitor if he can live up to that pressure as the kind of this face of this new Giants era that he is, in addition to Dable and Daniel Jones if he lasts, but very much TBD there. So, I think it's going to be interesting to see Thibodeau, what you get out of him early in training camp. RJ, as you were gone, I was just talking about how, my whole thing with Thibodeau in summation has been, you can't just push all those red flags aside and say they're totally BS. They're coming from nowhere. Like, no, there could be something to them. Let's monitor that. It's something you file away for later.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Like, so
Justin Fields fell for a reason. It's not just because everyone is so dumb and the Bears outsmarted everyone.
Everyone is wrong and this one team is right. And to be fair, Thibodeau didn't fall as far as Fields did, obviously. Incidentally, Fields was taken with the pick that initially belonged to the New York Giants. But yeah, I mean, the Around the NFL has a subreddit that fans of the show listen to, and that's where I really saw the majority of flack for Thibodeau. And there were some people who were like, hey, because there were some arguable, debatable questions that he should or shouldn't have been asked. But again, they kind of fit the theme of the show, and it's kind of like, well, if this is your 3rd appearance on the show, you should know the tenor of it by now. So again, I think it's an interesting argument and debate to have. And so if anyone is an Around the NFL fan, I'm certainly interested to hear what your thoughts were on his appearances. But it just was interesting. I mean, I haven't really seen a player kind of get feedback like that for an appearance somewhere. Generally, it's kind of like you look at Tyreek Hill and the comments he makes on his podcast. It's one-sided, one sort of way, and everything is kind of cut from that. It's kind of the same guy making the same sort of comments versus this. Again, it wasn't Jekyll and Hyde. I don't want to say that, but it was just different. And so he plays in a very, very large market. It's been a long time since we've had. I'm a Houston Astros fan, so Aaron Judge is really annoying, right? Because the world loves him because he plays for the Yankees. It's in New York, blah blah blah. We haven't had that persona for a long time in the NFL. That face of New York. And that goes both ways. I would say the last true face of New York was Mark Sanchez. And so I'm interested to see if Kayvon inherits that, if he becomes Joe Judge-like, and if he is Aaron Judge-like. Did I say Joe or Aaron a minute ago? But either way,
Joe.
I'm very interested to see. It's because he also talked about how he's not opposed to some rookie things like carrying pads and things like that, but he's going to stand up for himself. And we've seen those stories blow up too. I remember Des Bryant wouldn't do rookie things, and so I'm very, very interested to watch how that all unfolds.
What you're telling me about this podcast appearance reminds me a little bit of an interview. I can't remember when exactly it was in his career, but Ben Simmons, as Bear chimes in, did this interview with Mark Zumoff, who used to be the Sixers play-by-play guy, and everyone loves Mark Zumoff, super affable. You can't say a bad word about the guy. But he went on his podcast, and I don't think it got as much attention because this was a new podcast. I don't know how many people were really listening to it, but I remember listening to it because I love Zoom Off. And Ben Simmons was so like hostile towards him, and it wasn't even like Zoom Off was grilling him by any means. He couldn't. He's their play-by-play guy. He can only go so far. And it was just like Ben Simmons was giving him nothing to work with. And I think it was after the disappointing playoff series as a rookie when the Sixers lost to the Celtics, and like Simmons was terrible in that series. And so I was already kind of out on him as a player. And I saw this too. And I'm like, this is just not the makeup of like star player, face of the franchise, like guy you really want to root for. So I don't think that's irrelevant. It doesn't mean everything, but it's not just like a total non sequitur.
Right. And just to tie a bow, just because you're charming doesn't make you Michael Strahan. Like, to to be able to be that persona for the Giants. Maybe he is. But, I mean, I don't know. But I'm that's my question. I feel like our questions about the Cowboys and Eagles are a little bit obvious. So I don't think we have to spend as much time about them because like we've been kind of spent the last like 6 months about these things. But nevertheless, my first question about the Eagles is very obvious. It might be everybody's is like which Jalen Hurts is, and I don't even think that's the fair question. Like, because which Jalen Hurts implies that there's like a great passer that has existed before, and I'd say that just like literally. I'm not trying to be funny or snarky, but like, can Jalen
true?
Right? Can Jalen Hurts show up and be a legit passer, or is he that like? It's funny how like Philadelphia's plagued by this. Like maybe his like deep ball is like Ben Simmons' 3-pointer. Like, can he just not do it? Like, is it impossible for him to like be a passer? Is he just this like confined to running quarterback? And if he is, then I think I think a lot of people, that includes us, think that there is a ceiling on his abilities as a quarterback. So my question is that real, or have we just not seen enough to this point? I think it's probably real, but it is still a fair question.
The Eagles like to talk about they have a very high confidence level in Jalen Hurts reaching his ceiling. But the question always is like, okay, but what is the ceiling? Like, what do you actually think that ceiling is? Because I think a lot of people, like you said, don't think it's super high. And I think there's fair reason to believe that. I was just talking to Jimmy about this on BGN Radio. RJ, Jalen Hurts threw over the middle last year, according to the Football Outsiders Almanac, 10% of the time. That is the fewest in the NFL. The league average, I believe, was 22%. Like that, it's so extreme that he can't use the middle of the field. And like this stuff about him, he gets better every year. Like, I mean, does he really? If he's only using the field like 10%, like, and how much better is that going to get? Because you look at someone like Russell Wilson, and that hasn't really gotten better for him. No, he's been able to have quite the career without that. But I just kind of question, and that's the other thing. It's not like just like what is the ceiling. It's like, okay, people think he can get better, sure, but like how much better? Because it can't be marginally. Jalen Hurts needs to make a significant improvement in 2022. If he only improves marginally, that's not good enough. Like he has to be good enough to the point where the Eagles are actually not only competitive, but again, able to beat good teams, which is they did not do at all in 2021. And like, I just think of, Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert, and I'll even put Lamar in there, and, Brady, whatever, Rodgers, all the top quarterbacks, Dak, like Hurts is not in that level. He just clearly isn't right now. It doesn't mean he can't get there, but like, you can't just be ride or die with this kind of, 12th best quarterback at best, or like, he has to be legit good. And I'm just worried that people are kind of willing to settle for less. That's a whole nother topic, but I just feel like people lie to themselves and be like, well, we don't need a good quarterback. We don't need an elite quarterback. We can win without that. It's like, well, you'll probably only believe that because you don't have an elite quarterback. But yeah, that's my concern.
He's Jimmy Garoppolo. That it never happened for that's what he's facing. Like he's like Jimmy never became, a third Jimmy, shout out by the way here. Never became like an elite passer. Like he had qualities. People maintain that he has them. I'm not saying like their play style similar, but like there was a clear and obvious ceiling that he
it's
never
like opposite broke. Really. Like Jimmy only passes over the middle of the field.
Right. But you get my point. Like that's like they have a very clear and obvious limit to their potential. And we're about to either like further define that or he's going to break through it. By the way, you brought up Russell. You didn't respond when you brought up Slack a little while ago. Did you see the thing I slacked you on Monday about Russell?
I don't know if I did. Probably not.
He released a hype video. Russell did. Big shock here. And in it, the videos. Maybe I forgot to. Let me just describe it to you because this is actually even better. So he released a hype video. It's him like, working out, whatever this and that. He's wearing his like Broncos country let's ride gear. And he has these like awesome cleats. I'm sure there's like a cool name for them. It's not my thing. But so there's like a specific zoom in on the back right of the back
of the right cleat, and there's a Lombardi trophy like sewn on, like in threading, and next to it is the words, it's actually fourth, like the number 4th, fourth coming soon. ... The Denver Broncos have 3 Super Bowl titles in franchise history. So, it's just I'm a big believer in manifesting and envisioning things, and I'm all about that first foot forward. And I don't know about you guys. I know marching bands. They teach my cousin told me in marching band you learn to take your first step with the left foot, but for me it's the right foot because I want to get off on the right start, and so I put that on my right cleat so I can envision it every single day. Right foot forward. Fourth coming soon. I know I've only won one, but it could be my second, and the franchise is fourth, and that's why that's why we're here. I love this game, and I'm just so privileged to get to do this, and so and after the fourth, we'll be chasing the fifth, and I'm not trying to be LeBron James out here and counting because I know that the stories you guys will write, but that's what we're here to do in 2022.
Broncos and the Seahawks never been in the NFC East, but somehow Russell Wilson comes up more than any other player, probably, maybe, and even in the division on this podcast. So there we go.
Your biggest question about the Eagles?
I guess since you took the Hurts thing, which is obvious, and I do think it's very important how he performs in training camp. You can't just be like, well, it doesn't matter. We got to see how he looks in the games. It doesn't only matter how he performs in training camp, but how he does perform is totally table setting for the season. My other biggest question, I guess if I'll flip it, there's really 2 big concerns with the Eagles, RJ. It's Jalen Hurts and it's Jonathan Gannon, because just like I talk about the Eagles not beating a good team in 2021, which had a lot to do, I think, with the quarterback at some level, and also to do with the defense, because the defense got absolutely destroyed anytime they played a quarterback who wasn't Taylor Heineke or Zach Wilson or freaking Garrett Gilbert or who's the Trevor Siemian. So, you can only glean so much from training camp practices, but there's more talent on this team defensively. There is thought that Jonathan Gannon is going to show more 3-4 looks, especially with the Hassan Reddick edition, and then adding Jordan Davis in there too. So will we see that in practice? Will we be seeing different looks schematically? Will we see the defense, making plays, having a good camp? Again, I think I would argue they're at a disadvantage when you can't actually rush the passer or press and things like that, especially against a mobile quarterback in practice. But basically, are we seeing more of the defense? And are we getting a good feeling about it going into the season? I guess is what I would say.
I mean, big influx of talent. Right. I mean, and that's another question is is Jordan Davis going to be the draft god that a lot of people thought he was? And I mean, I don't think it's fair to expect a ton from him as a rookie, but still, does James Bradbury make a difference? Does Darius Slay, continue his rise in an Eagles uniform? There's a lot there. I mean, and that's still where the most difficult battle is. If you're an Eagles fan or Eagles rooter or Eagles staff or whatever, is the most difficult job you have is stopping the Dallas Cowboys offense in the division. And so can you do that consistently? Because you haven't really the last few times you've played them, whether it was Dak Prescott or even Andy Dalton or whatever. So,
yeah.
Well,
what's your biggest question about the Cowboys?
Well, no, I went first with Washington and you went second, and you went first with New York, and then I went second, and then I went first. We're kind of snaking here. So you've got to snake back and you go first for the Cowboys.
Well, I was asking you to buy time, but I guess I'll
buy time and say that, well, okay, whatever. I was going to buy time, but it's up to you. Whatever you want to do.
I'm going to stick with it. I was going to think if I could think of something else, but does the bad vibe offseason continue in the training camp? Do we continue to see evidence of things are not pointing in the right direction heading into the regular season? That could be a number of different things. Could be players, I don't know, getting into fights often, or arrested, or a bunch of injuries piling up, or McCarthy has some embarrassing moment, or there could be a lot of different ways that goes. I don't know what I'm envisioning specifically. Maybe it's Dak kind of not having the best camp of his career, different things like that. The offensive, this is what's his name? The guy replacing Leo Collins.
Terrence Steele.
Is he is he having a terrible training camp practice one day? Does the bad vibe offseason for the Cowboys continue into training camp?
I actually asked a question, it was earlier today for me, but yesterday for the listeners on the 750,
and it was how are the Cowboys going to sell this? Like, how are they going to spin this? Like, they always kind of, I mean, every team has like their like opening ceremonies at training camp, and Jerry kind of takes the mic, and it's kind of like, what are you like selling here? You know what I mean? Like what are you coming out and like putting a ribbon in front of to cut? You know, it's just like, it's a difficult like kind of product to sell. It feels like, you ever seen Jingle All the Way with Arnold Schwarzenegger?
No.
What? You're
Not a
joking?
big movie guy. Too long.
That's okay. It's from our childhood though. Like, it's a different. Like, I understand if I asked you, like, have you seen the movie that came out last week? Anyway, the premise of the movie is
Love and Thunder. It was good.
the premise of the movie is Arnold Schwarzenegger is looking for a Turbo Man action figure. That's what his son wants more than anything for Christmas. So he's like looking. It's sold out, whatever. But everywhere he goes, there's no Turbo Man. But they have plenty of Booster, who is like Turbo Man's sidekick, which is this like big, fluffy, pink, like bunny man sort of thing. And so like every time he goes to a store, they're like, we don't have any Turbo Man, but we have plenty of Booster. And everybody's like, nobody wants Booster. Booster sucks. And so like I kind of feel like right now the Cowboys have a store of boosters. You know what I mean? Like how are you getting people hyped up to buy these things? And so to your point, yeah, like I think all it takes is, I think that some of the like, Cowboys goes away with camp beginning and like football coming back and, you know, highlight reels of CD making catches and things like that. But I do think that it's such a sensitive time that the first whiff of negative sends us spiraling back down and into those emotions, right? It's the first like trigger of like the you know, how we were scarred over the last few months. And so it's like, oh no, oh man. I mean, like, to put in context the type of crazy things that happen at Cowboys training camp. The other day I did a radio show interview and somebody brought up my Twitter header. Have you ever looked at my Twitter header photo? If you haven't, I'm going to be really hurt.
It's you and Jerry Jones, right?
Yeah, and so that day, I don't know if you recall this, Brandon. Maybe you didn't like pay total attention to it because, you know, it's busy time. While the Cowboys were at training camp in 2017, I think, might have been 18. I think it was 17. Lucky Whitehead was accused of, I think it was like a robbery of a gas station where he was from, and the Cowboys cut him. I mean, they had all sorts of like issues going on in their team, but it was like, we don't stand for this. You know, like he was like
right.
the player they could make an example of. And it was really like obvious that they were trying to make an example of him when they had other players who had other issues on their team. And so it just
Randy
kind of
Gregory
ultimately
at one point, but yeah.
Yeah, well, it ultimately
That's right.
highlighted their like hypocrisy as opposed to if they had just done nothing. But so they make this big old to-do about cutting Lucky Whitehead, and it's only to find out that it was a case of mistaken identity, that it actually wasn't Lucky. And
showed
so,
him.
and so that moment in my Twitter header is Jerry meeting the media, and he was steaming. I mean, like, he was so upset because he was like, you know, you guys always criticize us for not, you know, coming down harsh enough on these players. We finally did it, and it's like, dude, this blew up in your face. Like, just admit it and
Now
just
it's
own
the
it.
media's fault.
Right. So like my point is like that kind of stuff happens at camp. So like all it takes is one of those sort of things to send all of this back into some sort of like downward spiral. The Cowboys are scrimmaging with not one but two different teams. Have you ever heard of a team scrimmage with two different teams throughout camp?
The Eagles just did it last year, so yeah,
Okay,
and they're doing it again this year, so yeah.
I feel like it's still a rarity. Like, you know, maybe it's a
teams are
new
doing
thing
it more often because
Right.
they don't want to play their players in the preseason games.
Right. So I'm interested to see how that goes. I mean, you know, it's interesting to kind of see how things coalesce. That's a good question. I mean, it really is. I think I would amend your question to say, can they withstand whatever future bad vibes come their way? Because it will come. Like, it's football. You know what I mean? So that's a good question. Congratulations. How do you feel about
You've liked a couple of mine. What's yours?
Wow. I guess is like, I really just want to see like how serious is this? Like, I mean, and I'm not expecting like dudes to be like, you know, sprinting with all their might at every single moment, but like, you know, who feels the intensity here? You know, because this is an intense thing. Like right, like who feels the heat? I guess who's looking like they recognize that there is a lot on the line here, and. I'll add like who other than Mike McCarthy potentially, because if we're lining up like people whose heads will roll if the season does not go well, he's at the very top, right? And obviously his staff is a subsequent result of that. But like what is the energy from everybody else in that sense? Like, does everybody recognize that they are like, as a team, the team is on a slippery slope, and if they don't get their proverbial act together, then a lot of changes could happen over the next year.
Which player, because we all talk about McCarthy, it's become so coach-centric that I feel like the players almost get lost in this. Like, which player would you say is facing the most pressure heading into this training camp? Which Cowboys player?
I think it has to be Zeke, just because, and it depends how you define pressure, but like pressure with regards to like his job, being lost, and by like they'll probably cut him, right? Like, because they can. Stephen Jones even said in the day that the NFL draft ended, they were looking at running back, and he said, you're always looking ahead. Tony Pollard's going to be a free agent. Zeke's making a lot of money. That was his exact line. And it's first of all, it's like, Stephen, I wonder why. Like, well, how did that happen? But so
there's no way to know,
right? They clearly recognize that, right? And I mean, if they do move on from McCarthy, I think they'll move on from Zeke independent of that, just because of the finances involved. But I think if they move on from McCarthy on top of that, I think it becomes part of this like culture reset, right? Like, we're resetting, new wave, new energy, with Dak as kind of the center of it all. Because again, Dak's not going anywhere, whatever. So I think it's Zeke, and it's more than just the finances, it's more than the McCarthy. It's that they want to be able to run the ball, and they not only want to be able to run the ball, they want to be able to run the ball with Zeke. Can you do it? Can you stop the skid where you continue to see your average yards per game diminish each and every single year of your career? Can you truly put an end to that? Because it doesn't seem likely at this point in time. So I think the answer is definitely Zeke.
Okay.
Wow. Lots of questions. That's 8 different questions that we just asked. Wow. Good time.
It's exciting times, RJ. It's the beginning of the season. If you don't believe that's true, well, you're wrong. Training camp is the canonical beginning. There's so many times, although I say that, I need to make fun of football is back. How many times do people say football is back during a given offseason? Because you say it for training camp, say it for like the preseason games.
Training camp, preseason,
regular season. But I feel like
if not regular season, the home opener. So like if you open on the road, then it's like the home opener as well. Yeah, no, it's like I would actually I've reworded a lot of your points today. I would reword this one as saying like, how many times do people say like, this is the footballiest time of the year. This is the greatest football week of the year. Greatest football moment of the year. Like, there's a lot of football rules. Like, that's just like we can just admit that. Like, football's the best. So wow. My last question as we wrap. Back to food, where we started this. What football seasonal food are you most looking forward to this year? So like something that you typically only eat during football season. And you can associate that with football or associate it with like the weather and the time of year that football season runs through.
I'm a sucker for all the pumpkin kind of stuff. Like, there's these little, I don't even know what they're called, but there's these little pumpkin snacks that are almost like soft. It's not a gingerbread cookie because those are like hard, but it's like a soft kind of cookie thing. I feel like they only come out seasonally. I don't know what they're called. I get my mom to pick me up some in the grocery store because I can't even find them where I am, but there's always a bunch by her. So something simple like that. I like that. Pumpkin cheesecake. Again, I said that earlier in the show. You could try one of those maybe as your gateway to pumpkin pie proper. I think Trader Joe's has those. A lot of good finds at Trader Joe's. What about you?
I'm looking forward to a good bowl of chili. Do you know what I mean? Like but it's got to be like that's
recipe?
I'm still a while from that. Like, cause I like it to be cold outside, like not just cool. You know what I mean? I'm gonna take that back. Looking forward to butternut squash. Just however you want to incorporate it into your meal. Butternut squash soup. You know what I'd like to? You know what I've never had that I think would be really good? I've never had onion soup, and I want to eat it. I want to like hollow out
French onion soup.
Well, so I want to eat onion soup, but I want to hollow out an onion and like another that isn't used in the soup, and then put the soup in the like hollowed out onion.
An onion ball.
Have you ever had that? Like, doesn't that sound like it would be
with
awesome?
An onion? No, I haven't had that. No one has ever had that. It's not a real thing.
How is that not a real thing? That has to be a real thing. Like, you put it, maybe this is what I'm envisioning. You put the onions, the hollowed out onions, in like a cookie tin, and you pour the soup in, and then you sprinkle some cheese on there. You bake it for like 5 minutes, get the cheese nice and crusty on top of it.
Firm up French the onion soup now.
Dude, this sounds awesome. I just invented something. I mean, that sounds really great.
So I'm the guy who doesn't basically know what soups are, at least certain kinds, who says gazpacho all the time when he means jambalaya.
I'm not a big soup fan, like, honestly.
You shouldn't be. You're from Texas. You don't need soup down there. It's too warm.
The episode of Seinfeld, the soup one or whatever, like, they eat so many soups
soup
in that episode. Well, they eat so many soups in that episode. They're like, I would never try. Like, I love chicken tortilla soup. That's about it. Chicken noodle, potato, broccoli cheddar,
Best soup
onion,
is
though.
like I mean, you have to try French onion soup, but you seem to not know because you haven't commented on me saying it one time.
I don't think I've had it.
Yeah, see, that's why I know you're avoiding it. Love a baked potato soup. So good. So like I like a creamy kind of soup more than like a brothy, like thin, like let's just say a traditional chicken noodle. I mean, that's nice when you're sick, and that's like a nice little thing to have. But if you're not, I need something creamy. Give me a baked potato soup. Wawa, actually, RJ has a really good baked potato soup. I have eaten like a family size one of those things, huge, one time just for Thanksgiving. Did a Wawa Thanksgiving one year, and it was a great.
You
time.
did it the night before we did Friday Football Friday. That's what you said that.
Yeah, it was it was during COVID. Yeah, or like I think
that was 2020.
Yep. So it was great time.
Would you do a sweet potato soup?
I'm not the biggest sweet potato guy, but I would try it. I'd give it a try.
You know, I think this is my last thing and then we'll get out of here. If I was a potato, I would hate sweet potatoes because I would be like, why do you get to be named sweet potato? You know, like, why can't you be something else? Like, the implication is that I'm not sweet. You know, like, I have sweet qualities and sweet tendencies. Like, you know, why do I just have to be a potato? Like, why is there not like a characteristic about my taste involved in my name? Like that, I would feel really, really hindered and limited if I was a potato.
You got to give me regular fries though over sweet potato fries. Sweet potato fries, I don't think are trash, but like if you just say fries and you don't specify sweet potato fries, and I'm expecting regular fries, and you give me sweet potato fries, that's devastating. You can't have that happen. You have to be upfront about it.
I agree. I like sweet potato fries if I'm using like a sourdough bun, you know, because then the meal is like somewhat sweet inherently. So, yeah. All right. Shout out to cheesecake, sweet potato soup, onion soup, onions in general, Alex Erickson, and BLG for carrying the show by himself when I ran to the restroom real quick. I've had a lot of coffee today, if that isn't obvious. So, Brandon, the last 8 words belong to you because we had 8 questions. Ready, set, go.
Well, RJ, I think it's only right that we end this in dramatic fashion. New voice.
Wow.